Have you ever felt that your landings just aren't quite right? No matter how hard you try, you're definitely not alone. And there are some common mistakes that could be holding you back without you even realizing it. I'm James, I'm a captain and an instructor on both the Airbus A350 and the A380. I've been teaching airline pilots to land aeroplanes like this one for more than 10 years. When I was a new first officer, one of the crew approached me after a particularly ropey landing and hit me with the old classic. Did we land or were we shot down? I laughed it off, but it definitely dented my ego. As a pilot, you could spend hours in pre-flight preparation, even more hours in flight dodging thunderstorms and terrain, but it's the landing that almost always leaves a lasting impression. In today's video, I'm going to show you where I'm looking, what I'm thinking, and share some tips and techniques to intercept the planet in the most graceful way possible. The aircraft has to be in the right place. The manuals give you a generic point at which you should start to flare, reduce the thrust, etc. These are only applicable if the aircraft is in the right place to start with. Remember the old adage, a good landing comes from a good approach. So in this scenario, we're flying an approach in a 30-knot crosswind, using the excellent fly-by-wire A380. What we're ideally looking for is to see 2 reds and 2 whites on the PAPI lights, meaning that we're on the correct vertical profile, and to be making nice small corrections so that the aiming point markers stay in almost the exact same spot in our windshield until the flare. And then, while this isn't necessarily a video about crosswind technique, on an aircraft of this size, you want to be leaving your rudder input to decrab as late as possible prior to touchdown. Stop over-controlling. This is particularly applicable to Airbus aircraft. Without wanting to get too technical, in normal law, without pilot input on the side stick, an Airbus aircraft will continue to follow the same trajectory. Side stick inputs by the pilot are translated by the flight control computers as a load factor demand in pitch and a roll rate demand in roll. What this means in practice is that even in gusty conditions, if you as the pilot don't tell the aircraft to roll, flight control computers will manipulate the control surfaces on your behalf to keep the wings level. So let's see what that looks like, and a quick chat about how to fly a visual circuit so you can go and have a practice for yourself. Generally, we'd fly a visual circuit for base training purposes at 1500 feet above ground level and at flaps 1. Abeam the threshold, start a timer and count 3 seconds per 100 feet above the ground. Then add or subtract 1 second per knot of headwind or tailwind component. After your 45 seconds are up, start a gentle turn towards the threshold, lower the landing gear and start descending at around 300 feet per minute. Then you're either looking out of the window to find the runway, or if you can't see it, the distance to threshold can be estimated from the navigation display. Work on about 300 feet per mile, and you'll be in about the right place. Note the flight control inputs. If the aircraft is doing what I want it to do, I'll just leave it alone. One of the most common mistakes we see amongst even professional pilots is this stirring motion, where eventually all of these inputs add up to nothing, or worse, serve to destabilize the flight path. So the recommended technique is therefore, when you want to make a change to the current flight path, add an input, then let go, wait a few moments and see if your input has had the desired effect. As a general rule, when you're flying an Airbus, you want to touch the side stick as little as possible. Eyes outside. Now, modern technology is great. Generally, as you progress through your career as an airline pilot, you get more and more toys to play with to help get you and your passengers to their destination as safely and efficiently as possible. Over time, the temptation to become reliant on these tools is really strong. But it often comes at the expense of the basic flying skills you've spent hundreds of hours building to get there in the first place. A standard 3-degree approach looks the same out of the window whether you're flying a Cessna 172 or an A380. As we've already shown, a good landing comes from a stable approach. The flight directors will almost guarantee the aircraft is in the right place, so it's easy to see why it's easier just to follow them. But by their very nature, they are a reactive tool. What I mean by that is if you're established on an approach and you increase your pitch, the picture out of the window will change instantly, but you haven't yet displaced the aircraft from the glide slope. So the flight directors won't command a pitch down until that displacement has taken place. If you wait until you're slightly high, the correction to regain the slope will be greater than the pitch change required to correct your visual picture. The idea isn't to disregard the PFD completely, but to encourage pilots to move the needle a bit more towards looking outside than in. So imagine there's a fly stuck to the inside of your windscreen. As you get closer to the runway, the aiming point should stay in exactly the same place. Maintaining a consistent gap between the top of the glare shield and your aiming point is a useful technique to manage your vertical profile. You can pay attention to the runway geometry to stay on the centerline. You don't need the localizer to tell you when you're flying the extended centerline. If you pay attention to the edges of the runway, you'll have all the information you need. When you're off the centerline, the visual picture will be skewed such that one edge of the runway will appear more vertical than the other. When you're in the middle, both edges will appear to be at similar angles. So you've got your aircraft in the right place. With the correct pitch and rate of descent coming into the flare, how do you judge when to flare? On modern airliners, the cadence of the automatic callouts coming from the radio altimeters
50, 40, 30, 20, 10
is a good indication of your rate of descent. And it's a great tool to judge when to start the flare. However, in testing that I've performed in the simulator, if we take the auto callouts away, pilots seem to do just fine. From your very first flying lesson, you'll likely be told by the instructor to move your gaze from the aiming point to the end of the runway as you come into land. This gives you a much better perception of rate of descent by engaging your peripheral vision. Try it now. Watch this approach and stare at the aiming point.
50, 40, 30, 20, retard, 5.
Now, watch it again and look right at the end of the runway. Pay particular attention to the rate at which the sides of the runway seem to push each other apart.
30, 20,
Notice the difference?
5.
So, we've covered a few tips on how to perfect your approach and landing techniques. With practice and patience, you can master these skills and take your flying to the next level. So give these techniques a try and share your experiences with us. And be sure to check out our other videos on aviation topics for more tips and insights. Your feedback is invaluable and we're excited to hear about your progress.